Welcome to Whole and Beautiful. Good evening and welcome. This is Whole and Beautiful. I am Angela D Oliphant, your host, and I am so glad that you all have joined me for another night of information, revelation, and change. Tonight is going to be a phenomenal night, and I am so excited about tonight. But before we go into what I'm going to be doing on tonight, I want to remind you that we are here every Friday at 7 p.m. And then there is a replay at 4 p.m. on Saturday. I am still doing my couples conversations and my mentoring moments. So if you know of a couple that you would like to be on the show where we can talk to them about what they do and how they interact together, then give me their information, let them send me something to wholebeautiful@gmail.com, and I will get in contact with them. And also the mentoring moments, if you know a man in your area who is, hi Josie, thank you for joining. If you know a man who is working in the community and he is mentoring the younger generation, let me know. I want to put him on the show called Mentoring Moments. That segment is just to see what we're doing for our young men in the area or even outside of this area. But those shows are continuing to come up, and I do have some more interviews that are going to be coming up soon where we're going to talk to some more people, because we always talk about information, revelation, and then we talk about the change. And for my whole and beautiful nation, thank you for joining me on tonight. Y'all like, comment, share, let somebody know that Whole and Beautiful is on and that they don't want to miss tonight's show. I have been telling y'all need to be here because it's going to be amazing on tonight. I think that is it. As far as like with the topics, everybody, if you know of a topic, you say, hey, I need to know some information about that. I want to know more about that area. Send me an email, wholebeautiful@gmail.com, and I will get that on for you. We will talk about that topic. We will flow into that topic, and we will see what we can find out about it, because I'm all about finding out information, and then we want some revelation so that we can change and grow. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining tonight. I am glad that you have the opportunity to join me on tonight's show. Guys, I'm going to get ready to get into this. I have been wanted to have this person on the show for a while. I met her maybe about a year ago, and she is in the States now, so I can talk to her and have this interview with her. And I'm excited about having the interview with her. So I am going to get ready. We're going to get ready to bring her in. Her name is Allie Porty. So can we bring Allie in so that we can begin to talk to her? Hi, Allie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are welcome, and I am so glad that you are here, that you had the time to come and just share with us on tonight. When I talked to you earlier, I was telling you we wanted to talk about you. So what I want you to share with us in the beginning is just to share with us some information about who you are and what you do.
Okay, I'm Allie. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I am a fashion journalist. I cover 4 Paris Fashion Weeks a year. I write currently for The Hollywood Reporter and Euronews and Forbes Middle East. I have written for Harper's Bazaar Arabia, Harper's Bazaar US. Oh, I also write for GQ Middle East as well. So I'm freelance, and it allows me the flexibility to cover different topics and not have to stay in a newsroom and only cover one aspect of something. So I prefer freelance over having to have a contract with a company.
So you, because you're freelance, you get to work with different companies and go.
Different outlets.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good though.
Yeah.
That is good because then you're, like you were saying, you're not just in one place with one company all the time. You get to
Yes.
move around.
Yes. And it allows me to see the different talents in the fashion world, and what different brands are creating and putting out for the masses, instead of just, yeah, having to be glued to an office in New York. I can't imagine having to, yeah, do that.
Did you always want to be a fashion journalist, or is that something that evolved over time?
It's something I fell into it. No, I did not ever dream of being in fashion or a journalist. It's not something that I was talking about when I was in high school, that I thought about. My bachelor's is in history. I went to the George Washington University in DC, and then I got my master's from Holt International Business School in London. And I thought that I would take those 2 degrees and go work maybe at the UN or back in DC. I'd done a lot of internships, interning at the very end of the Bush administration, at the US Department of Labor in Washington, some political campaigns and various organizations, and in Congress a few times. I thought I would be doing that, but it really is a God thing of me falling into fashion.
Wow. I I was reading something like, it's been a few days ago, where you had wrote an article about, it was mainly about yourself and how you were how you were born in a Christian household and the things that happened and stuff, and how you were in a place where you were not treated favorably when you were younger,
Mm,
and
yeah.
then you ended up, like you said, you didn't like people, you didn't want to be around God, didn't want that lifestyle. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how everything switched and changed for you through that?
Yeah, so I'm an only child. I had a good childhood. I get on really well with my parents, but I don't know, maybe it was rooted in low self-esteem growing up. I was an overweight child in school, and I was a quiet kid in class. I was amazed my senior year getting the superlative for most likely to succeed. I didn't know anybody in my class was paying attention to me. Um, but I would say, because I was shy and low self-esteem, I developed this bitterness towards people. Now, I did grow up my 4th grade year. The church that my mom started going to was or is a predominantly white church, and I was the only Black child in the children's ministry. In the youth ministry, when I moved up, the only Black girl. There was a biracial kid, half Black, half white, but I was the only one with my skin tone, and I was called the N word, and I was not included for sleepovers. And I did go to one of the pastors on staff to tell him I was being called the N word, and he just walked away. And I think something inside of me got even more bitter uh, towards that church and towards people, and I just kind of closed into myself like like a turtle going into its shell. And yeah, I hated being around people, but I can't attribute it solely to that church
Right.
experience. It was, yeah, like I said, low self-esteem, and being a quiet person, and it didn't help being overweight either. And anyways, 8th grade, my parents sent me to a camp. It was the summer after my 8th grade year, so getting ready to go into ninth grade, and it was a leadership women or girls leadership camp at Columbia College. And I think it was like a week and a half, and just the speakers and the women, like Darcy Strickland from WLTX
Yeah.
spoke, and Hearing women of stature speak about their jobs, it's something in me clicked that I began to hold my head up higher. And when my parents came to pick me up, they said we're going to Charleston tomorrow because President Bush will be speaking. And so I got to meet him, and then something clicked again. And my parents were heavily involved in politics, and so I started getting involved in politics and getting to meet the governor and the South Carolina's senator. Uh, for on the federal level. I mean, it was just amazing being able to get involved in politics. So I really started coming out of my shell. I was still shy, but
Right.
being able to, yeah, be exposed to these kinds of people helped me greatly.
And that, I was looking at that, and that really like touched my heart, because you were saying how God got a hold of you, and how everything started to change. And now it's like you're in this profession where you're with people all the time.
Yes.
And I was like, that amazes me. Do you love being around the different people that you get to meet now?
Oh, I do. I remember having a discussion with my parents. I forgot how old I was, maybe middle school. And I remember saying, I hate people. I hate being around people. And my dad was like, I just can't imagine the little baby that we brought home from the hospital, that you have this hatred for people. And my heart was so hard. But I think even in that moment, God was working on me, because in speaking those words out that I hate being around people, I knew that that wasn't right. Like, that's not natural.
Right.
Because heaven isn't going to be individualistic. We're going, God is a social God. uh,
Yes.
and so I think it was, I had wounds from being overweight and from being picked on in school and my church experience, and I didn't have the tools as a 13, 14-year
Right.
old to process that out. So I think that's, the heart my heart got harder and the bitterness got deeper. But over time, and that, again, that experience of going to that camp really changed me. Being able to meet the president of the United States and people in civil service at a higher level really changed my life. So I knew that by the time I graduated high school that I wanted to go to Washington. And again, I thought that was going to be my path, but God had another plan. Um,
Yes.
when I studied in London, I had a lot of friends going to Central St. Martin's, which is a very well known fashion school. And when I would go over to their houses, they'd be working on fashion projects. And I would say, oh, that's so cool. It's more fascinating than my diplomacy and negotiation class that I'm taking. But I never thought I would be in the fashion world. Um, yeah.
How did you transition from going from where you were doing your internships and thinking that you're going into like the political side, and then end up in fashion? How did that transpire?
So right after my bachelor's in DC, I went right away to London to get my master's, and then went back to the US to look for my first job, as so many of us do. And I could not get a job in Washington with all the contacts that I had. I couldn't get a job, and it was quite frustrating. But I started working for an international affairs magazine doing sales, ad sales. And I mean, God really blessed me, because I became born again in October 2012. And so that's when around the time I got this first job. And I was dating a guy in London right after my studies, and this guy was not good for me. And that relationship ended, and it was so painful, because like the first boyfriend, you
Yes.
remember the first boyfriend, and you're when it ends, it's painful, the first
Yes.
relationship. And it was a lot of pain for me, but that's when I became born again, through the pain of that. And God blessed me with the company I was working for. I brought in $40,000 in 6 months. and I was making connections in DC, but I felt like God was going to move me abroad. So a few months later, I moved to Berlin for 3 years, and had, when someone becomes born again, God really begins to work on that person. It's like you need to buckle up because you're about to go on a roller coaster ride, in the sense that He's going to work on mindsets that need to be broken off, character flaws, just kind of like the military, breaking you down to build you back up.
Right.
And that was Berlin for me. Um, and then after Berlin, I moved back home, moved back here for a couple of months, was looking for a job. And then I worked in DC again. I got a consulting role at the Organization of American States. And then God, I knew He was moving me back abroad again. And I thought I was going to move back to Berlin, but God made it. And I went to Berlin for 1 month. This is 2019, June 2019. Went to Berlin, and I said, God, if you're not opening the door for Berlin, because I had kept my bank account open, and he told me to close it, or I just felt like the Lord said, I'm not
Right.
calling here. So I closed that bank account, and I went to Lebanon to help with Syrian refugees. So my consulting role ended in DC, and I thought, okay, I can go help with the church camp in Beirut while I continue to look for things. Maybe I'll find something in Dubai, in the business world. And I had the intent of going to Beirut for 1 month and stayed for 3 years. But it's fashion came through Lebanon because the Lebanese are very gifted in couture fashion. You have some of the best couture designers like Elie Saab, Zuhair Murad. Those are the most famous ones, I would say. And I needed some income. And while I was helping with Syrian refugees, and God called me to Lebanon 100%.
Wow.
Um, and through my being faithful to listen to Him and to go, to the Middle East, I'd never been, well, no, I had been to Egypt before, but to just go and
Yes.
follow Him, then came the door of fashion opening, because I simply sent an email to the editor in chief of, or the then editor in chief of Harper's Bazaar Arabia, asking if I could cover Lebanese designers and their work. And she's like, yeah. And that's very rare for an editor to just off the bat respond to somebody. Usually editors don't respond. It's hard to get their attention. Anyways, and so I started going to Paris Fashion Week and covering Lebanese designers. God gave me a dream a few months before. I'm a dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
And a few months before I entered the fashion world, I had a dream about fashion, but I didn't know it was going to be so literal for me, uh, that I would be in the fashion world. So that's how it happened. I simply emailed an editor, and she let me start covering Lebanese designers, their shows during Haute Couture Week in Paris. And that led to writing for Forbes and Hollywood Reporter and all these other publications.
Wow. You you're at a lot of the where, like you were saying, the fashion weeks and the different ones. Have you had the opportunity to like meet somebody that you have said, man, I would like love to meet that person? Have you been able to meet some of those people, somebody that you
Mm.
had wanted to meet and
Yes.
talk to?
Yes. Karl Lagerfeld, when I first got into fashion, Karl Lagerfeld had died around that time, and there was a memorial service for him at the Grand Palais in Paris. And I'm sitting there, and Mario Testino walks in, and he's a famous Vogue photographer, and my mouth is hanging open. And I see Caroline, Princess Caroline of Monaco, and my mouth is still open. And uh, Anna Wintour. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Anna Wintour, the movie The Devil Wears Prada with Meryl
Mm-hmm.
Streep. Meryl Streep is playing Anna
Okay.
Wintour in a way, how she, yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I see Tommy Hilfiger, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm just like overwhelmed. And Pharrell had performed, and he was super nice to me. and took a picture with me. The First Lady of France was there. It was just a lovely moment being in a room of powerful people. And
Right.
it's not easy to get into rooms with powerful, influential people. But here, a girl from South Carolina in a room with these people, only God can do that. And
Yes.
that was an amazing moment. So, yes, I have been able to meet a lot of fascinating people. I like Anna, when I saw Anna Wintour, I was like, I went up to her and I put out my hand and I said, "Hi, I'm Allie. It's nice to meet you." And she did shake my hand, and because I caught her off guard, but I didn't realize that she's not the nicest person. And I said, "Could I have a picture with you?" And she just walked away. So
Oh
I'm like,
wow.
okay, well, the movie must be true then. But overall, I find people in the entertainment world to be nice. When I go to Cannes Film Festival every May, I always find myself around a actor, like whether it's being in an elevator with one, like Cannes 2022, I got on an elevator and it was full. And I said, "Is there any space for me?" And this voice called out and said, "Yes, of course there's room for you." And it was Letitia Wright, and who played in the Black Panther movie. Super nice. I met Leonardo DiCaprio last can, and he was really kind. So, yeah, I have to pinch myself. I get starstruck.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. Do you have a favorite place that you've been where you're like, I really love it here, or is it different places you've been and you like them all, and there's different things about each one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have. I mean, I love London. Um, if I had to say what's my favorite place, I would say London. But I've lived in 9 countries, and I like something about every place I've lived or every place I visited, and there's things about every place I've lived that I don't like. So, yeah, if I had to pick a place, it would be London. But there's something breathtaking about the south of France and seeing turquoise blue water. There's something about Montenegro where it's just an amazing, beautiful place. It's nothing like being in Rome or Paris or Madrid. These are cities with characters and personalities and a flair all their own. Like there's nothing like being in New York or Atlanta.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you adjust when you get to some of those countries and like the culture is different, or like we were talking about earlier before we came on, the weather is different,
Yeah.
and how do you go in and be able to adapt when you go into the different countries? Because some of the things that we have here, like in America, or even right here in Colombia, is totally different when you step into another state or another country.
Yeah, so my first semester studying in London, I really clashed with the culture. I thought the British people would be like Americans because we speak the same language, and we're not. Um, yeah, they're not like Americans. And that was a huge culture shock. And I remember like a week after getting there, I called my mom and I said, "I'm coming back home. I don't like it here." And she's like, "No, you're not." And she hung up. uh, and so I struggled through the first semester, but by the second semester, I fell deeply and madly in love with London. And I realized that I cannot judge a culture based on my culture. So, um, because that experience, and I had just dedicated my mind, programmed myself to not judge a place based on my American culture or the Southern South Carolina culture has helped me be able to adjust uh, because Arabs think and approach things. We're all humans, but we approach things in different parts of the world different from another part. So yeah.
With traveling to the different countries that you've been in, have you learned different languages?
No, I'm still trying to learn English. I'm just kidding. No, because I've lived in just about capital cities of every country I've lived in the capital,
Mhm.
and the capital tends to have it's cosmopolitan and pretty good English. So I
Okay.
think like the language I took in high school and college was Spanish, and when I lived in Spain, I find for the Spanish, it's a lot of work for them to try and listen to me struggle through Spanish. Although they don't have good English themselves and they prefer you speak to them in Spanish. But when I'm struggling through it, can you imagine somebody is trying to learn English and they're like, today, my car, I go to the the store with the and you're like, you're trying to you're
Yes.
like, this is more work to try and figure out what you're trying to say. So Germans have good English, so no, I they just revert to me in English. So it makes it hard to learn um another and I'm not a language person.
Right.
If I can get by with English, yeah,
It's like I'll start with the English.
yeah.
What has been like one of your greatest like challenges with everything that's been happening as far as like with the fashion, moving into fashion, or has it been a challenge? Has it been good for you?
Um, it's been good in the sense that I've had my eyes opened up to this amazing world of talent and seeing what humans can create in terms of clothing. Um, that's stunning to see how God has I mean, he's a creator and he's
Right.
put the ability to create on inside of each and every one of us. And I think everyone is a creator, even if you're a lawyer or a banker. You may have a lawyer who plays in a band on the weekends or yeah. So that's been really fascinating. The challenge is that writing, journalism does not pay well. Whether you're a fashion writer or a finance writer, there's no money in journalism. And so that has been a struggle. Also, I would say magazines are just getting skinnier and skinnier. Nobody's buying magazines anymore, especially in America. So a lot and the rise of online and the internet. So and with subscriptions, a lot of publications have drastically downsized or closed. I was on the phone with an Italian friend today, and she writes for Cosmopolitan Italia, and they're closing their office in a week. So, yeah, it's LA Times like 2 months ago let go 300 people. NPR has over time been letting go a lot of people. Euronews has downsized greatly. So it's a hard industry to be in. And I think at some point I will leave the journalism side, and it's a very hard thing to let go because it's a glamorous world. If you're doing lifestyle journalism, fashion journalism, even travel journalism, and being able to go to um, uh, beautiful locations, you don't want to give that up.
Right.
But it doesn't pay well. And so I'm 35, and um, there's only so long you can keep take or living hand to mouth in that sense. I could go work for a fashion brand and do in-house communications, but I'm going to be stuck to that brand and I'm not going to be able to go around to the
In
you know,
travel.
yeah, and go to the different shows. If you're working for Valentino, you're working for Valentino. There's no more Dior shows or
Okay.
Givenchy or all the other brands. So that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. And you were talking about magazines, and I saw where you had Seal magazine, and that's
Zela is the
Selah.
pronunciation. Yeah, it's the
Okay.
German word for soul. And
Okay.
that's my own online magazine that I've had. It started off with encouraging Friday text messages in 2012 after I got born again, and then a German friend encouraged me to turn it into a blog. And I did that for about a year, and then I turned it into a magazine where it has different sections. So um, it's faith based,
Mhm.
but with travel and fashion. Yeah.
Yes, I like it. And where can if they want to go and subscribe to your magazine so that they can read the articles and see what's going on with those areas, where would they go?
It's zeelemag.com, SEELEMAG.com. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I wanted to ask you also about your podcast
Yes.
and how that got started. It's the soulful side of life.
Yes.
How did you come about with that? With that title, with that being the title for your podcast?
Well, Zayla means soul, and I wanted soul to be in it in some way or fashion. It used to be called the Zayla Food Podcast. I was doing a play on words, so like soul food, but
Mm-hmm.
Zayla food, and I just I did it wasn't working like having food in the title because it yeah, I mean it would either have to be soul food or yeah. So I changed it to the soulful side of life. And it's a podcast with movers and shakers, inspiring people who are succeeding in their own lanes and what they're doing in life, from like Dee Hilfiger to Rani Zakim, who's a Lebanese couture designer. Just recently, I interviewed Joe Chilada, and he has a wealth of knowledge on Lebanese fashion history and just, yeah, the Lebanese contribution to the fashion world. And um, I've interviewed musicians and actors, other journalists, just people who are doing big things in their sphere. And yeah, I really enjoy it. It gives me the opportunity to have a, I'm a written journalist. So the articles that I do for big publications, those are in written form. But the podcast allows me to have a conversation with people, which I love.
Yes, I love because I go in sometimes to listen. So it's
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
love your interviews that you do with the different people because I love people just to see that they're different but yet the same,
Yes.
and they have a lot of different things that a lot of people are doing, and it expands you because
Yeah.
you're no longer limited. It's like, wow, okay, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
And that did that with your magazine too, going in and looking at everything, and I was like, oh, I never thought about this is really nice to kind of put it all together and have it faith-based also.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
would be nice to have like a Vogue, a Christian Vogue kind of magazine, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of women out there who love fashion and travel and lifestyle. But you want articles or yeah, content that's faith-based, not 10 ways to get him to do this or, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What oh man, you were talking about earlier when you were saying that some of the places you enjoyed being in, some of them you may have ran into like some different things that were not so good. Was it ever a place where you went where you just felt like unwelcome there, where it was like, this is not a place that I feel like I can just be me, that I'm on guard here?
Surprisingly, the Middle East is very racist, and I know that if some of my Arab friends were here right now, they might be a little bit, like about what I'm about to say about Arabs, but they can be quite racist people. I think one reason is that they were heavily involved in slave trades. A lot of trade routes went throughout the Middle East. So, and it, and another surprising thing though with Arabs is I find Muslims to be much nicer than Christian Arabs.
Mm,
And that breaks my heart in many
yeah.
ways. But Israelis can be quite racist against blacks. I had a Jewish friend explain to me when Noah's son covered him up because I think Noah had drank too much and he was naked and he cursed his son with a dark mark, that Jews believe that dark skin is a curse from God, and that's how dark skin came to be.
Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, Israelis can be quite racist, but I've not lived in Israel. I've not felt racism when I've gone there. They're just not friendly people, and I think that's just because they have a lot of conflict and war problems happening
Right.
there. Lebanon was hard for me, and I left because of how I was treated because of my skin color, not because they've got a lot of economic and political problems. I would have lived there for 20, 30 years. I left because it's blatant racism, and I put it on the same scale as Jim Crow era, in some cases with the Lebanese. Um, Michelle Obama made a comment once that something along the lines of every time she leaves the house, she's reminded that she's black. And I really felt that in Lebanon. And the George Floyd situation happened when I was living in Lebanon. And um, I was thinking to myself, I know that the US has racism. I've experienced racism in the US. But I wish Black Americans could see how racist Arabs, even Asians, can be. It's
Mhm.
like another level. And it gets me because I don't understand how people of color can be
Mhm.
racist against other people of color. And I would tell the Lebanese, you think you're white, you think you're whiter than white people. But when you go to the West, you're just another Negro like me. Or
Yeah.
go to Europe, you're in the same boat with me, but they don't get it. And I dated a guy at church in Lebanon, and his mother hated me. And she told me to my face that I was too black for her son, that I wasn't good enough for her son. I
Wow.
had a master's degree. He didn't finish university. I'm a good girl. I go to church. I come from a good family, but it wasn't good enough for her. So, yes, there's a big problem in the Middle East with uh, Egyptians, maybe not so much with even North Africans because they have darker or black looking people in the northern Africa, but yeah, not in the Levant, with the Lebanese, with the Israelis. It can be tough.
Wow. Wow. With you, what I wanted to ask you, what encourages you? Like you you have this magazine where you put like encouraging faith-based stories that's there in your podcast. Somebody can listen and they get encouraged by listening to your interviews that you do with so many different people. But what encourages Allie?
Hmm. I think stories of people who are moving and shaking and helping others encourages me. It encourages me to interview people and do all kinds of stories on people around the world who are doing some fascinating things, and creating, I would say, and on my faith, of course. I
Yes.
can't do anything without the Lord. There's no way I could have lived in 9 countries and adjusting the different cultures and dealing with different types of people. And I've met all kinds of people. I have had all kinds of ups and downs. God really protected me in the Beirut explosion on August 4th, 2020. My apartment windows got blasted out.
Wow.
I wasn't home. Thankfully, I would have probably gotten cut up really bad by the glass. But yeah, I can't do anything without the Lord.
Wow. What would you say to that person that may have had like a similar experience like you have with having that low self-esteem, dealing with the things that you dealt with, and really at that point where you're saying, okay, I don't want to be around people, I don't like people, and they're struggling with some of the same things in their life right now, what would you say to them to kind of encourage them to come out of that and reach for the Lord like you did?
I think it's very helpful to talk to somebody if they can find somebody around them, even if they don't know them somewhat so well, but somebody that inspires them, that they can they have a reach to get in contact with, and ask if that person can maybe be a mentor for them or a counsel for them for a season. Um, I think also serving
Wow.
serving can really change your perspective, because when you see people suffering, it really changes your perspective.
Hmm.
When I went to Lebanon initially, and I was helping with Syrian refugees, and I was hearing stories of like this one girl whose brother was killed right in front of her by the Assad regime in Syria. I And then another woman who had like 5 kids, and she walked with them, young kids, under they were all under the age of 6, or yeah, 6, I would say, walking from Syria to Lebanon. I would go home in the evenings and cry like a baby. I had never heard stories like that in South Carolina. We don't we're a bit far from other parts of the world.
Hmm.
So, we don't have conflicts here. Yes, the US has problems and
Right.
pain and poverty and gang violence, yes. And those are real important issues. Um, but when you go into your community and you serve and you help with the less fortunate and you give back in some way, it gives you perspective,
Hmm.
um, on your life and your situation, and it could maybe bring healing. But you got to be able to talk to somebody, and sometimes you might need pastoral counseling, or you might need to speak with a psychiatrist, or a Christian counselor of some sort. You got to be able to get out how you're feeling, and maybe, um, if they're good, they will be able to get to the root of why is it that you hate people? Because
Right.
maybe it's rooted in low self-esteem. Maybe it's because you were overweight as a child, or maybe you had a racist experience. Yeah. And if you don't talk to someone, it will stay in.
Yes, you have to get it out.
Yeah.
I had a whole lot more, but our time is like wrapping up. So I want you to just share, if you have an encouraging word or an encouraging Bible verse or something that encourages you, that can encourage somebody else, and for you also to let people know where they can contact you or see, because I see you post a lot with the fashion weeks and different things and the foods and the places that you go. So just an encouraging word, and then where they can find you.
Okay. An encouraging Bible verse. When I was living in Beirut, and no, in Berlin, and I was under so much stress trying to get my German visa. And yeah, it was like 3 months of stress, and I was just relying on the Lord. I wanted it so bad. And one night I was wrestling in prayer with the Lord. When you want something so bad, it will bring you to your knees. And what I got out of that prayer session was the words, have faith, trust God, and keep moving. Like,
Mm.
don't give up. And there's a Bible verse, Exodus 14:15. Um, After the Israelites had come out of Egypt and Pharaoh was chasing them, I think that was a scenario. Uh, and the Israelites looked fearful, and the verse says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on.'" And I think sometimes, we're looking at God to please help me, please save me, and God is like, just move.
Yeah, just keep moving.
Yeah, yeah, and he will protect us. He will open the right doors. He'll keep the wrong doors closed. You have to move. God doesn't move unless we move. And we have a green light with God until he gives us a red light. So if we're moving in the wrong direction, he'll give us a red light. But you have to move. Nothing happens without moving.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's great. And where can they find you if they want to see the magazine, if they want to listen in on the podcast, or just follow you?
You can find The Soulful Side of Life on Spotify podcast or Apple Podcasts. So that there's that. And if they want to email me, they can email me at zeelemag.com. So it's SEELEMAG at gmail.com. And you can reach me there.
Okay. Well, Ellie, I thank you so much for
Pleasure.
coming on the show. I thank you for being here and being a part of it. This interview has been great for me because when I first met you, when you were there with your mom at the bank, I was like, I have got to get her on my show. And
Thank
I
you
am
for
so
having me.
glad that you were able to do it.
It's my pleasure. It's great what you're doing too, encouraging. You're telling other people's stories or having people on to encourage others. So that's really great.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to the time that we can have you back on
Of
and
course.
maybe we can go further and talk about a little bit more different things because I have a wealth of questions, but I got to some of them, so we'll get to the other ones at a different time. But
My
thank you again
pleasure.
for joining.
My pleasure. I'm happy to come back.
Okay, you have a good evening, guys. I thank you all for joining me on tonight. I thank you for being here with me. We'll be right back here 7 p.m. next week on Friday. If you missed any part of this interview, you can go and listen tomorrow at 4 p.m. It will be a replay. And until we meet again, I am Angela D Oliphant, allowing you to see, hear, and know that whole and beautiful is not just your destination, it is most definitely your journey. See you again next week, guys. Good night. Good night, Allie.
Good night. Bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you would like to be a guest or recommend a guest, you can contact me at wholebeautiful@gmail.com. On all other social media platforms, it's Whole and Beautiful. Remember, Whole and Beautiful is not just your destination, it is most definitely your journey.